Welcome back. This morning, we're shining a spotlight on the forensics in the murder case against Karen Reed. She is accused of backing into her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, with her SUV, leaving him injured and ultimately killing him as he froze to death in the snow. Those are the allegations from the state. Reed, though, says she's innocent, and her attorneys are arguing that the injuries John O'Keefe sustained aren't consistent with someone being hit with a car.
He was found not in the street. He was found on the lawn that had begun to take some snow cover. And his torso was pristine. His hip area pristine and his legs pristine. Somebody being hit by a car, I would submit, does not look like they had been punched out by Mike Tyson.
Okay, so that is the defense position, but the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has been very firm in its allegations, saying that the forensics do support injuries consistent with her speeding up in the snow, hitting her boyfriend, knocking him over, and him dying as a result. We have very special guests we want to bring in now. With me, forensic pathologist Dr. Michelle Dupree and forensic death investigator, professor at Jacksonville State University and the host of the Body Bags podcast, Joseph Scott Morgan. Great to have you both analyzing this case for us. I'd like to start with the injuries, if I could, please. And so we're going back to winter time in Boston. It is a cold, very snowy night. There's snow on the ground. And Dr. Dupree, I wanted to ask you about this. We have some of the findings from autopsy. We understand that the manner of death was listed as undetermined. The cause, blunt impact injuries of the head and hypothermia. In particular, we know the officer suffered a fractured skull, 2 black eyes were seen, and lacerations to his arms. And the state is saying that Karen Reed sped up and hit him, and he fell over and sustained these injuries. Can you see these injuries happening with that set of facts, Dr. Dupree?
I can, under a certain set of circumstances. For example, the black eyes, you can get black eyes from a skull fracture. It depends on what kind of skull fracture that is and where that skull was fractured. So we would have to know that to really determine that. But yes, you could get black eyes from a skull fracture. The rest of it on the arms, certainly. If he was crouched over or bent down, you could sustain that from a car hitting someone as well. So they might be consistent, but it's all going to depend on that totality of circumstances surrounding that scenario.
Right, Dr. Dupree. And would you take one thing a step further for us, please? Would you explain how the black eyes could occur from a skull fracture?
Sure. Depending on where that skull is fractured, your orbital sockets where your eyes are located sit on top of your skull. And if that plate in your skull is fractured, then you will get blood that is going to seep down into that area, causing what we call raccoon eyes. And that is a particular type of skull fracture that you can see.
Dr. Dupree, thank you for that. Another point I would like to bring up in our discussion here is the cocktail glass that could be key. Professor Joe, I want to go to you on this point, please. We know that John O'Keefe was at a bar drinking with other friends and Karen Reed and left the bar holding his cocktail glass. He actually walked out with it, took it with him. And the district attorney, I have a clip here, is talking about how pieces of that glass were found embedded in the bumper of the defendant Karen Reed's car. Let's watch.
The damages to the right rear corner panel of the defendant's vehicle. Embedded within the bumper to that vehicle is pieces of a cocktail glass. The victim, Mr. O'Keefe, is last observed on surveillance video, external surveillance video from the Waterfall establishment that he left just prior to going to 34 Fairview, with a cocktail glass in his right hand. Same arm that's injured, the same type of glass that is then recovered from the bumper of the defendant's car.
Professor Joe, this point of evidence, the pieces of the glass in the bumper, for you, does this support the state's theory?
Perhaps because you're referring to a specific point of contact. Remember, they're referring to the arm. You know, he's making this assertion that he's holding the glass in his right arm where these injuries, these so-called lacerations that they're referring to, he sustained. Here's the thing, is if you're saying that this is the same glass that was used in that establishment, I'd like to know how they're drawing that conclusion from a physical evidence standpoint. What kind of examination was conducted? Did they go and retrieve glasses from that same set at the bar and then compare the glass that they have? From a manufacturer standpoint, does it originate from that same point along the way? And for anybody that works in trace evidence, this is going to be key because you have to have something to compare it with. And where's the body of the rest of the glass? If all the remnant that they have perhaps is contained in that bumper, were all of the pieces collected? And this is a messy scene because you're talking about snow here, Julie.
It sure is, Professor Joe. That's a great point. My understanding is that there were lots of pieces of that glass that had shattered found around John O'Keefe and some in the bumper. But we shall see. That's a great point. Did they substantiate that it is the exact same glass taken from the establishment? We know the Reed team is alleging that there was placement of the glass and tampering with evidence, which is why they've actually been successful in motioning the court to allow DNA sampling taken from investigators because they're alleging that evidence was planted here. And why this really fascinates me, I would think it would be very tough to plant this kind of evidence. Professor, what do you think about that? Do you think it's possible to do it the way the defense is alluding it may have been done here?
Well, they can allude to it, and of course their fallback position, I would think at least, is going to be, oh, well, these are law enforcement officers. They know how crime scenes work. They know how we process these scenes, and it can be alleged from that perspective, I suppose. They can put that forth for the jury to hear it potentially in court. And yeah, I mean, it's got some legs to it, I suppose. But again, is all of this going to marry up with the other injuries that this fellow sustained all over his body? Because they're alleging, you know, some of these injuries are not consistent with, say, a bumper strike on a body. That this on his body, it originates from other things, like there's the mention of a dog involved in this particular case. Yeah. Right.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Professor Joe. We have a picture of it. We were showing it while you were speaking just a couple of moments ago. The markings on the arm. Defense counsel for Karen Reed, they've, of course, been very public about their position on this case, and they made the allegations you just mentioned about, oh, was it a dog who lived at that house who bit him or scratched him? We have that clip. Let's roll it now.
He said that the medical examiner said this was not from an animal attack. I would highly recommend that Mr. Morrissey actually read witness statements before he starts pontificating about them. Here's what the medical examiner actually said. First, she said that she was unqualified to make a determination as to whether or not there were animal attacks. Does that sound familiar? Unqualified. And here's your actual statement. Quote, in this particular case, all I can say is that the injuries are there. I documented them, I measured them, but I can't tell you what caused them.
Oh, okay. Dr. Michelle Dupree, tell us, please, listening to this, whose side do you think this evidence helps?
To me, looking at the photographs, these injuries do not look like they are from a cocktail glass. They do look to me more like they may be animal scratches or bites even. But a cocktail glass is going to break into multiple pieces. You have several iterations on this arm along, 10 inches maybe? That just doesn't make sense to me that it would be a cocktail glass.
And Doctor, at autopsy, would a forensic pathologist like yourself be able to tell if those scratches happened on the same day that John O'Keefe was killed, or if they potentially were there a day or two or three prior?
Again, that very much depends. We can tell if the injuries were post-mortem. These do not look that way, but we can also tell an approximate time frame. If it happened within the same day, we may not be able to pin it down to the exact same hour, but if it did happen within the same day or two, we should be able to tell that, yes.
Great information from you both. Big thanks to Dr. Michelle Dupree and Professor Joseph Scott Morgan. We'll see what happens as this case progresses with Karen Reed.